Hello, my name is Gavin, this is Genre Books, and this is the second of my Garb August weekly reading roundups. Week 2 was Men's Adventure. Week 2, unfortunately, was only a week long. Week 1 was 10 days. Here we've had the traditional week, so I've not read quite as much as in the last roundup. But let's see what we got. The Judas Diary by W. Howard Baker. This is the 6th Richard Quintain novel. He is a James Bondish type character, works for the British government, and is tasked with all sorts of espionage shenanigans. I don't think this crossed anything off of my Garbingo Card, although I think it may be a pseudonym for the author, so possibly there, but there are unfortunately only 2 guns on the cover, not more than 2 guns, so that doesn't count. It certainly counts for Men's Adventure. I have to admit the book didn't do an awful lot for me. The main character of the series, Richard Quintain, is inscrutable, which means that they don't actually write a lot about his character. And he's not the main character of this book. Instead, we have the Judas alluded to in the title, and Eric Franklin is his name. He is not pleasant. He is a British journalist married to the daughter of a prominent American politician, but he's not a very good journalist. And he is out in Vietnam trying to drum up a story and trying to get cash in whichever way he can. He's a gambler. He's a man cheating on his wife. He's a man who will cheat anybody and anything to save his skin or to make $1. And the book is written from 2 perspectives. One is the more militaristic journal, almost case notes written by Richard Quintain. The other is this confessional written by this character, Eric. That's probably the most unbelievable part of the novel. He's trying to get away with something. He's trying to get away with quite a few things. And for some reason, he has written all of his nefarious activities down, which is probably something a traitor to his country or his adopted country should not be doing. All in all, this was fairly unbelievable. There was plenty of action in it, which is workmanlike. But yeah, it didn't leave a great impression. I followed that up with a book that did cross something off the Garbingo Card, and it crossed off the conspiracy theory box. This is Ian Slater's Air Glow Red. Me read book okay. It's I quite enjoyed it. It's a longer piece, certainly than the Judas Diary. It's possibly some more rounded characters. There are some archetypes as well. Our main character has unbelievable amounts of presidential access. So the President of the United States turns up as a character, and it shows that the government of the United States has been infiltrated by KGB agents who are pushing for a new satellite system to help relieve the United States of its travails in the energy crisis. It references an earlier book by Ian Slater, but I don't think there's any requirement to have read it. It really is sort of mentioned in passing. And it relies on a few tropes: Red's under the bed, the late 70s, although this came out very early 80s, 1980, 81. The concerns about the energy crisis, which obviously had an impact towards the end of the 1970s. And the plot's good enough. The idea is interesting enough. The repartee that the main character has with either his colleagues or with the woman he ends up on the run with is jarringly kind of the hard-boiled language of the 40s. In that respect, it seems quite out of place in a book set in late 70s, early 80s. And I also think it is probably about 50 to 60 pages too long. There is plenty of action, but they get captured once, maybe twice, times too many. But all in all, it's a page turner. It's it is engaging at that sort of surface level, and I wouldn't recommend everyone go out and find a copy immediately, but also if you see it, it's worth picking up. Mushroom Press time travel shenanigans with Volsted Gridban's The Purple Wizard. This is under a pseudonym. The Volsted Gridban is John Russell Fearn, who was a prolific British writer in the pulps from the 30s onwards, and up until and past the early 1950s, where this book came into being. This is Scion science fiction. 1 shilling and sixpence. It is really tatty. It's falling apart. I did have to do a rough and ready job there with just a piece of paper and print stick, just so that the cover, which was hanging off, didn't fall off entirely when I was reading this, and I was reading this very gingerly. It's okay. Again, this is a very brisk read. The science is silly. This is a story of a man who has invented a time travel machine, and it uses the idea of entropy to affect the time travel. But the extrapolations it takes from the theory of the the law of the second law of thermodynamics is nonsense. Given that entropy exists, and therefore over time the cells, the atoms, become more disorganized, if you simply rearrange a person's atoms to make them more organized, as space and time are connected, it will just take the person whose atoms have been reorganized back to the point in time where that level of organization exists. Not that it's tested, but if you make the atoms more disorganized, it will throw you into the future. And at a certain point, the machine will work the reverse operation, bring your atoms back to the current present level of disorganization, and pull you back to the present. So it's internally consistent nonsense. The professor wants to keep his machine a secret, but he does tell his daughter and prospective son-in-law, who he sends back to the year 828. It's called the Purple Wizard because the man's abilities are viewed as necromancy in 828, and he and his fiancée nearly find themselves, they do find themselves brushing with death when they meet King Egbert. The historical side of this, apart from the science fiction side, is also nonsense. 828, and everyone is speaking like they are from the 17th century. I readeth this book, and Mary canst hardly believe mine own eyes. But there we go. This is a mushroom press book. This is written in a hurry. This is written to order. This is written to a very specific page count. I was not expecting any great shakes of literature, and in that respect I was not disappointed. But John Russell Fearn is always fun. Under a pseudonym, part of a long-running series, the first book in a long-running series, and also I think we could probably class him as a vigilante. It is Edge, and this is Edge #1, Lolona. This is the first Edge book, and it is the first Edge book that I've read. It is, however, not the first time Edge has turned up in a book that I have read. Back in June, I read Burning Man, a Jubal Cade novel. It's the same publisher. It's not the same writer, but the writer who wrote Edge wrote the first couple of Jubal Cade books. But by number 6, he's not writing them, but Edge turns up at a pivotal point in the Jubal Cade book and helps our hero Jubal Cade out in a gunfight. So I had met Edge before, but this is his origin story. It is properly violent. It's fairly gruesome in some of the detail, and the violence is the only thing that the writer is particularly descriptive about. We know that it's set in the West, but you would barely even know that from any description of landscape, which is 1 or 2 sentences at most. Very different from many Westerns that I've read, which linger on the landscape and wax quite poetical about it. There's no poetry with Edge, but really enjoyed it. I'm glad I've got a whole stack more of them, because I managed to get a bundle of them. I'm not quite sure whether I've got the next one in line, but I think there's about 50 of these, over 50 of these, so it was going to take a while to acquire and plough through all of them, but hopefully I've got time. And this next book is a cross between Edge and Shogun, and this is Six Gun Samurai by Patrick Lee. I've not quite finished this. I've got now about 50 pages to go, but I will get that done today. This is fairly much the same kind of thing. Our main character is out for vengeance. He dabbles in a little bit of vigilantism, and it also helps me to tick off the ninjas box of the Garbingo card. The clash of cultures that is explored in Shogun is really only paid lip service to here. This is obviously coasting on the back of the success of the mini-series. It from the land of the Shogun. It references it in the on the cover there. But other than a few phrases dropped in, other than the fact that he's carrying a sword and that he eats his vegetables raw, but other than that, there's not a lot of difference between Tanaka, Tom Fletcher, and a Western hero. There's, a fair amount of racism dropped into it, so we get our chance to be racist about the Japanese, Mexicans, and Native Americans. But Tom Fletcher seems to rise above all of this and is An honourable man, he is a samurai in the Wild West. I should also mention that I watched the first Garbingo film last night that allowed me to cross off the modern square, and that that I will be relying, I think, from this point forward, on some movies to get me over the remaining squares. I haven't checked every book, but I am 99.9% sure I do not own a step back cover. So I will be watching, I'll say, a 3D film. I may be watching, I'm tempted by Jaws 3D, which I don't have a 3D copy of, but it was definitely a 3D film. I also do not have any books that are based on video games, so I may find a film which is. And for trash and translation, I think I'm also going to maybe double up on that and find myself a nice Italian giallo film and use that to tick both boxes off. And that's going to leave me with gangs, killer kids, sexy vamps, and drugs. And the middle square, green on the cover, and cozy mystery with cats. I think I might have found a book which doesn't quite fit those parameters, but is close enough. And that is The Green Millennium by Fritz Leiber. So it's got green on the cover. The cat is sort of green. There's a green hue to it, and it's got the word green on it in case there's any disputation. And it's got a cat on the front cover. It doesn't look particularly menacing and therefore potentially cozy. So maybe this will be the donkey between two bales for that middle square. But the prompt for this coming week, the 18th to the 24th of August, is sex and violence. And I think I've got enough of that in the old pile of possibilities to fulfill that and tick off a couple more boxes. But until then,